members talked about the Intelligence Reorganization Bill, now in a House-Senate Conference Committee. We hear first from supporters of the House version of the bill, then supporters of the Senate version. This is 45 minutes.
The microphones on you. I am really sorry I did that. We are sorry here this morning that Chairman Hoekstra cannot be here. He is still working on this bill in conference. We just spoke with him on the telephone, so they are still meeting on this bill, and they hope to be close to an agreement. But as a member of 911 Families for a Secure America, a family group that represents the families of many victims, we are asking that they pass the right bill, and that we are very hopeful that they continue working on this bill and that they get a bill that includes these immigration provisions that have also been recommended by the 911 Commission. We also understand that as recently last Tuesday, the Chairman Kane of the 911 Commission supported these immigration provisions and supported that they be passed at this time. The provisions that would include more funding for first responders, the provisions that would begin to take some security for our borders as a serious issue and to limit terrorist travel here in the United States. We also have a letter that will be in the package that comes out from the National Federation of Police, who also support the immigration provisions that are contained in House Bill H.R. 10 and is now in conference. And at this time, I would want to thank again Speaker Hastert and the leadership, and also all of those members of the House of Representatives that supported these provisions, because it was an act of courage on their part to do it. But I also believe that many people of the United States consider it common sense to try to secure our borders and may not understand all of the special interests that are interested in not seeing our borders secured. I am also hopeful that the Senate will continue to move on the immigration provisions. There are 7 senators who are supporting the immigration provisions in this bill. Senator Inhofe, Sessions, Kyle, Grassley have supported it. Also, in a second letter, Senator Hatch, Cornyn, and Senator Chambliss. So we really believe that the people of the United States can take hope that our borders will begin to be secured, and I want to thank those senators who are beginning to move on this issue. It is possible to get some provisions on immigration now if we continue to work for the right bill. I also, at this time, am asking for a personal meeting with Senator Lieberman of Connecticut. Peter Gadiel, who is the president of 911 Families for Secure America, is from Kent, Connecticut. And he lost his son at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 103rd floor. And we would like to meet with him and to ask him to begin to support these immigration provisions, because the Senate is beginning to move. And so with that hopeful note, I am now going to ask Joan Molinaro, who lost her son, who is a New York firefighter, at the Towers.
Good morning. Thank you. We, the 9/11 FSA family members, understand well the need for compromise. What we don't understand is the need for sacrifice. The Senate bill, as it stands, dealing strictly with intelligence and choosing to ignore immigration and driver's license reforms, is a sacrifice. For us, the families of 9/11 FSA, the passing of the correct bill, the right bill, the just bill, is a matter of life and death. I owe it to my son's children to keep them safe. We cannot keep them safe if we cannot keep our borders safe. If we cannot track people coming into this country, how do I know that the person I'm sitting next to on a train, in a plane, is not the next Mohammed Atta? You must protect, and the only way to do that is to have better border control, to secure driver's licenses. You know, I had to go to Germany, and to get a passport, I had to bring my social security number, I had to bring my birth certificate, which did not have a sufficient issue date on the back, so I was denied my passport. I couldn't leave my country without that passport. But a terrorist can come into this country and get lost. You need to secure the borders. It's if you have your leg chopped off, do you stick a Band-Aid on it or do you put a tourniquet on it? And we're not asking you to keep immigration a shut door and not allow anyone in here. But you need to turn that tide to stop the illegals from coming in and open it when you can verify who they are. My grandchildren deserve a safe America. Their father died trying to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. My name is Deborah Burlingame. My brother was Chick Burlingame, the captain of American Airlines Flight 77, which was slammed into the Pentagon on September 11th. I'd like to just remind you folks of some numbers. There are 3.3 million non-citizens entering this country every year. We welcome immigration. We are not against legal immigration. There are 500,000 every year illegal aliens crossing borders. We know that 18 of the hijackers, the 19 hijackers, acquired U.S. ID by some sort of fraud. We know that 15 of the 19 hijackers could have been stopped at the borders if we'd had proper immigration laws either being enforced or enacted. The war on terror is going to be fought on many fronts. And the 9/11 Commission has told us that cutting down on attacking terrorist travel is a way to fight the war on terror without firing a shot. Without firing one shot, we can stop these guys. And I would echo the thoughts of Joan Molinari. We know that there has to be some compromise. We know how things work on Capitol Hill, or we're certainly learning. But we reject the notion that this artificial November 2nd deadline will kill all efforts. We say that these good men and women in the Capitol are sincere about tackling terrorism and about this immigration bill. And so we say, why impose an artificial deadline? Let's get a bill that's more about substance and less about form, and congratulating ourselves for putting forth a defective bill. And for those who are saying gloom and doom if we don't have it by November 2nd, that it is a disaster for this country, I ask those people, what are you going to say to the American people if we have another terrorist attack in this country and it turns out that they got in with forged or defective documents that could have been stopped if we had enacted the right bill? And we encourage these congressmen and women to stay at the table and pound it out until you get a right bill, whether we go past November 2nd or not. We believe in you, and we think you can do it.
Any indications from the White House? I mean, I know that you've all, both groups of families have been trying to get the White House to be more actively participating in this process. Have you heard from the administration at all as to why they have not come forward and just push the Congress to do something?
I have had no contact with the White House. I do not know of any other members. I'm sorry, they got moved over. Wait a minute, I got to put it back. And by the way, I'm Colette Lafuente from Poughkeepsie, New York. I have had no contact with the White House, and I do not know of any contact with the White House by any members of our organization of 911 Families for a Secure America. Yes.
You mentioned there were 7 senators who did express support for the immigration provisions. But have you been in touch with any of the Republican senators who are also conferees? Have they given you any indication that they might be willing to move in that direction?
I have not, but I have gone to my senators from New York State, both Senator Schumer and Senator Clinton. We went there last week. We met with their staff, and we are asking them to support these provisions as well. Yes.
Are you ladies basically saying that you want to, you would rather see the House not agree to this bill if these measures are not in it, and you're urging them, are you urging them not to give up these measures?
Absolutely, because I would look at it in this way. Had secure borders been a part of legislation 2 years ago, we wouldn't be worrying so much today about terrorism. We would begin to have knowledge of who is in this country and who is not in this country. There are reports that Chechen rebels have come into this country. Nobody can disprove that. Nobody can prove it, but nobody can disprove it. And I think that it is important to start controlling these borders and securing our borders. Also, to pass a bill with only intelligence provisions does absolutely nothing in gaining a secure country for the United States for 2 reasons. First of all, it will give people the idea that something has been done that will actually begin to secure our borders, and it's you know, maybe it'll be harder to get something done on immigration after that. And secondly, only secure borders is the way to really begin to establish who is coming into the country or not into the country. With more intelligence, all we're going to be able to do is begin to be able to track more who is coming in here. Why not, you know, lessen the need for intelligence and secure our borders so that we don't have to do that?
Let me say something. If the Senate bill goes through as it is, I understand that the 9/11 Steering Committee has been told that if it goes through with the intelligence reform, after the election they will bring up to the front immigration reform and driver's license issues. In July, I was here lobbying against the DREAM Act and Ag Jobs Amnesty. If immigration is not put forth in this bill, if it dies and doesn't get in, when it comes back as an issue, if it comes back as an issue, it's going to come back as the DREAM Act or Ag Jobs Amnesty. I don't want to give amnesty to illegal aliens. We did it in 1986. 2 of those who received amnesty bombed the World Trade Center in 1993. Stupid is as stupid does. Must we repeat history? No. You must put in this bill immigration reform, or we are really in trouble.
Do you think, can I ask all of you if you think that because other 9/11 families are opposed to this language and whatnot, do you feel like there's a split between the families is actually maybe hurting this process at all or muddling it a bit?
Opposed to what language? Opposed to what language? What?
To the immigration and other stuff, wanting to get the Senate bill done and rather than the House bill, that kind of thing.
We are here representing over 300 victims' families who want immigration in there, who want driver's license reform in there.
It's also my understanding, and other members are here today, that it was told to the members of the steering committee that if immigration provisions were in a bill, that there would be no bill, but that people do support having immigration provisions. And I can be corrected if I am wrong, but that was my understanding. I think, frankly, a lot of people didn't have any real hope that something would be done on immigration, and then H.R. 10 appeared within about a month and a half ago. I mean, I've kind of lost track of time because I also have a job, too, and I come back and forth. And I really, you know, I would ask if people are opposed to securing our borders.
We know that the Family Steering Committee, which I would remind you is made up of 12 individuals, not 300 families, 12 individuals. They don't take a vote from anybody. They don't poll anybody. It's 12 people. But with all due respect to them, we know that they support immigration. We know that they support these reforms because they are part of the 9/11 Commission recommended reforms, and they've said they want them all passed. I would also remind you that when there was testimony from 3 family members in front of Susan Collins' committee, one of these family members was asked, I think it was Ms. Breitweiser, if you could only have one reform, one, top of your list, what would it be? And her answer was border security. The one thing she wanted, border security, is not going to be part of this bill.
Yes.
Immigration is a catch-all phrase, or the immigration provisions sort of catch-all for all sorts of things that are in the bill. Do you guys support expedited removal of immigrants without judicial review? Do you support sort of the more controversial provisions rather than the ones that have bipartisan or bi-chamber, bicameral support?
That I understand that there are some compromises going on. The provisions that we are really interested in are the secure driver's license provisions, because the hijackers all had 63 valid driver's licenses, and I know that Virginia has cleaned up their driver's license so that it's much stricter. And I come from New York State, and New York State probably has the most secure driver's license in the United States. There is also a provision in the bill which would double the amount of border agents, which we believe really needs to be done, because as everybody knows, it was a National Park Ranger who was killed, and we do not want to see any of our border agents, murdered as well. And we also support the tripling of the investigators in that. These are the issues, and the fact that the House bill truly creates a secure driver's license, because each state may make a choice whether or not to create a secure document for a driver's license. But if that license is not secure, then the citizens of that state will not be able to get on an airplane, because it will not be recognized by the federal government as a secure license.
Follow up along those lines, do you support the national database to put in names and details on individuals even though they may not have a criminal record?
These are the provisions that we are supporting. The House will, make their compromise. The Senate will make their compromises. These are the ones that we see will really help secure our borders. They actually work at the border. These are out on, on the ground where it really needs to be done.
Two more. Ma'am, throughout this process, House Republicans have suggested that they might drop some of the border security immigration provisions if they get the language they want on NID authority. My question to you is, will you all support this bill if, in fact, that happens?
If it does not contain the provisions which will begin to secure our border, we will not support the bill. We have to see our borders secured. That is what matters to us. And it matters to us not only for my husband, Joan's son, or Deborah's brother, and all of our children and grandchildren. It matters for them in their daily lives as we go forward, for every citizen of the United States.
Position on the NID in terms of how the House and the Senate are split on this? I mean, are you in favor of the Senate bill's language or in the House bill's language?
I have not studied either bill. Of the NID provisions, I understand, and I can only tell you what I understand, that the House bill would leave more authority with the House the House Armed Services Committee, and that the Senate bill would create a National Intelligence Director who would have budget authority, and it would not have to respond to the Congress in terms of how it is, how they create their budgets and everything else. I leave that up to the Congress people. I think common sense, and most of the people that I talk to as I go about my life want to see secure borders, and the polls have suggested this as well. Over 70% of the people in the United States want to see our borders secured.
Last one.
Are you prepared to wait until after the election to have your version of the bill passed? And do you feel that some momentum will be lost if you wait until after the election, as many have stated on both sides of it?
We are prepared to wait until after the election, and I think that is important, that we are prepared to wait. These provisions are so important in this bill. They are worth waiting for. They are worth fighting for. And that is why we are here today.
I'd like to add something to that. I feel that if these provisions are stripped away, it is that stripping away that will lessen the chance of them getting enacted later. That the November 2nd thing is a completely artificial deadline. Someone has said that immigration reform, illegal immigration reform, let's stress we're talking about illegals, is the third rail of politics. Nobody wants to touch it. And we think that people need to step up and exercise some moral courage. Someone asked me, are you a special interest group? But the 9/11 family is now a special interest group. I would say that the interest group here is the citizens of this country, the United States of American citizens. And they've shown in poll after poll that they overwhelmingly support these kinds of reforms. again, this is the war on terror here in this country. Without firing a shot, we can do tremendous damage to their efforts to get in here and do us harm.
Thank you. Are you concerned that this is going to be lost to what percentage of the house?
I think whenever you're adding more to a bill, where you're involving, you're inviting in to your offices. You know, aviation has a huge lobby. That's going to get you problems. But these things are absolutely key because we know, even with the aviation security we have in place on September 11th, we had these provisions on the books. At least 15 of those hijackers may not have gotten on those planes.
This type of intelligence will stop terrorism without firing a shot. This type of intelligence reform will identify terrorists as they seek to come over our borders. The immigration issue is important, but it is well outside the scope of fighting terrorism. It is much broader than the fight against terrorism. And in order to get this legislation passed, it has to be on point with fighting terrorism. I just think they mischaracterize what the Commission has said. Even Kristen Breitweiser in her statement talking about how watch lists, the border control also is a function of terrorism watch lists. And all of these things are important, and all of these things are in the Senate bill. I'm just looking at my notes to see some of the of the things. Just 2 seconds, because disrupting terrorism plots through intelligence is the way to fight the war on terror without firing a shot. I think the statement was made that passing a strong intelligence reform bill is not going to make us safer. I just simply find that disingenuous. That is not an accurate statement. It will make us safer. Okay, it's my notes from what I said.
Mary Fetchett. I lost my son Brad, and I'm on the Family Steering Committee. You know, I think even to have this backdrop here is very misleading. The 9/11 commissioners did not support H.R. 10. They support the Senate version of the bill. The Senate version of the bill has 38 of the 41 recommendations, including, as Beverly spoke about, the core recommendations that are really going to address the failures on September 11th. It's somebody in charge of the 15 agencies, a national intelligence director with budgetary authority to coordinate, prioritize, and to address, with regard to resources, what the current threat is. It's a National Counterterrorism Center. It's the Civil Liberties Board, which is really extremely important as we're talking about immigration and law enforcement reforms. We cannot have our rights as American citizens taken advantage of. There has to be checks and balances in the system. We are in favor of immigration, not immigration reform, but reform that is going to specifically address the threat of terrorism. We cannot have controversial issues of special interest groups delaying substantive recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. Someone that was speaking mentioned that they weren't familiar with the two bills, and that is correct, because if they were familiar with the Senate bill, they would understand that in the Senate bill there's counterterrorism travel intelligence reforms, there's integrated screening systems reforms, biometric entry and exit data system reform. There are travel document reforms. There are identification standard reforms. These are all the things that they've talked about, what they want. It's in the Senate version of the bill. The recommendations, and many of them in the H.R. 10, are bogging down this important legislation moving forward. I recognize that November 2nd isn't, a line in the sand, but I do feel that the administration, the same administration in Congress that failed to protect our families on September 11th, is failing us now. We do not have their support. I think it's divided what's going on within the administration. If we want reform, we need it immediately. There's a sense of urgency in having somebody coordinate these 15 agencies. Nobody's in charge today. In your life, my family's life, and all of Americans' life are at risk as a result. If you're not motivated by an election cycle, then what will you be motivated by? I think it's very misleading what's happening right now when we're talking about Homeland Security and when we're talking about 9/11 reform, or when we're choosing to lift the graphics off the 9/11 report and place it on legislation that the 9/11 commissioners do not support. We continue to support the recommendations that the 9/11 Commission has pushed forward, which include all of the issues that these family members were up here talking about. Perhaps they should schedule a meeting with Senator Collins and Senator Lieberman so they can understand what the Senate version of the bill is.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Dillard, and my husband, Eddie Dillard, was murdered on board Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon. In addition, I lost 4 employees. As a black American, I feel very strongly that this part of the bill has to be dealt with in a very delicate manner. I don't think that just coming out with and blocking all illegal aliens is the way. And since we've got to terrorist travel and effective screening, this is a very important part. As Mary has already said, the counter-terrorist travel intelligence, the integrated screening systems, biometric entry and exit data system, the travel documents, the identification standards. And it really troubles me that we would be, they would tell us that there are 12 members that are making all these groups or making all the decisions. If so, I'm not a part of that 12. I'm a Pentagon family member, and I support what these women have done, and I will continue to support them.
I wonder if you could address the issue of who's actually representative here. Who does your group actually represent? They're saying they represent several hundred family members. Who's more representative here, the family members? And aren't the family members now just divided among themselves like everybody else?
We decided some time ago, and one of the interviewers asked me, there are so many issues. There are so many different ways for each family member to participate. So there are different things that are important to different people. I don't think that we are a splintered group. We are just a group that we're just a group of people who have different interests, and different priorities. So that's why we're not. But no, we're not splintered.
Hi, I'm Carol Ashley, and my daughter was in Tower 1. I just want to say, for the Family Steering Committee, from the beginning, our effort has been to make our country safer. And we've had people from all over the country send us emails. It's not just a family issue. This is an issue for all of America. The goal is to make us safer. And we don't disagree with some of the immigration issues. That's not the problem. Right now, the problem is to focus on getting intelligence reform, because that was the heart of the 9/11 Commission recommendations. Let's get our intelligence in place. As they say, I've heard people say that the terrorists are right here in this country. They talked about Chechnyan rebels coming through across the border. Well, if they are here, we must have the intelligence to locate them, figure out what they are doing, and stop them. The intelligence is a critical issue. And as for the November 2nd deadline, as has been said before, it is a point where the momentum may be lost afterwards. What will change the conferees and the attitude of the administration to make it better? What will change them to make them want to go ahead and make an agreement on this? Right now, we have people, the American people, looking at everyone and saying, well, what are you doing to make us safer? Well, what are they doing to make us safer? Have they passed this bill which will give us intelligence that is integrated and that collaborates and communicates with each other? Not yet. And that's what we're looking for. It is an American issue. It is not a 9/11 family issue. We are here because we lost loved ones. We made a promise when our people were killed that we would do everything in our power to make this country safer, and that is why we're here. And we join with other family members in wanting to make us safer. Excuse me, I wasn't quite...
You're not a member of the press, please.
Interrupt you.
Yes.
No, please.
What's the nature of the contact between the different 9/11 groups? Are there meetings between them? Are there discussions?
We get their emails, and I assume that they get ours. You know, we send out statements. So, we send our statements out not only to 9/11 family members, but to people who have contacted our website from across the country, and in fact around the world.
And I also, I spoke to a couple of leaders of Families for Secure. I spoke to one of the leaders, Bruce Tassell, this morning. I think, it would mischaracterize us to talk about that we are so different. We're in many ways more alike than different. I think we all want our country to be safer, and they've come up with, some very good ways to do it. But I think, what I heard time and time again was the word immigration, and the word we want to focus on is terrorism. And I want to just address one thing about the artificial deadline. I think Carol said very well there, that the election, it's not a date, it's the concept of the election. Are we going to hold our public officials accountable? Are we going to hold the president accountable? He can make this bill happen. He can make this bill happen. But he's not even here in Washington to see it through. He's out campaigning. And to me, that feels like a vacuum in leadership. But that deadline, that keeps moving. We're already 3 years past 9/11. And if we don't, the longer we wait, the more Al-Qaeda has to celebrate. I think that group will be celebrating if we don't have a bill by September 11th. And that's what frightens me. November 2nd. What did I say? No, September 11th.
What is your name? I need a name.
Beverly Eckert, E-C-K-E-R-T.
My name is Abraham Scott, and I lost my wife, Janice, in the Pentagon on 9/11/01. I just want to say that it's good to be living in America where you can freedom of speech. They had their opportunity to speak, and now we're going to have our opportunity to speak. And as Beverly said, we're alike in many ways. We are fighting for a just cause or changes to America. But in my opinion, I think the intelligent reform is a very important piece of the 9/11 recommendation. I say that not to belittle the immigration reform, the driver's license, but I think the intelligent is the front line of this country's defense, because if we had the consistent watch list that we should have had prior to 9/11, we would cut a lot of those, if not all, a lot of those terrorists that came in this country. In addition to that, right now you have splinter intelligence organization, the NID. That's the most important thing right now that we need to focus on, to bring the intelligence program under one umbrella so that we can make these reforms and make sure that we have not have miscommunication between the different organizations. And just to give you an example, and I've worked in the intelligence community, both with the FBI, a little with NSA, also with the customs and so on. And I know that there are instances right now where they have systems that don't even talk to each other. They're in one. They could be in one co-located room, and the system are not interconnected, and that's need to be changed. The other thing that I think need to be reformed, which is probably not directly related, and that is the way they do their screening for background investigation. Each one of those agencies have their own method of identifying or doing their screening for background investigation. Just to give an example, if you go from FBI to DEA, you would have to go through almost a complete background investigation, and that says, to me, that's a no-brainer. It's nonsense. But my bottom line, the bottom line for me is the important thing right now is to get this intelligent reform enacted or appropriated or passed by Congress, and more specifically, the Senate version of the 9/11 bill. And I will accept nothing less than that.
Could I ask a question about Title I and the NID? How do you view the Zellico letter in terms of its impact on the conferees, particularly House Republicans?
Well, I think I mentioned this last night. We had a meeting at the White House because we had heard publicly in the news that they supported the Senate version of the bill. And we left that meeting, 2 weeks ago, more confused than we were at the beginning of this process. They were still dissecting both of the bills. They talked about a much later deadline. My sense is that they're divided within their own administration. Not only did Philip Zellico can't come out, but General Myers came out publicly and made a statement. And my sense is that what these are just distractions from really getting a comprehensive bill on the desk of the president. And if the administration can't come to agreement, and if you have the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, trying to maintain control over, his budget authority, when this was a Defense Department that failed to protect us. I mean, there's things in the news today still that they're not clear on. They don't feel it's their responsibility to protect us domestically. I heard Mr. Rumsfeld at one of the hearings say that as far as he was concerned, it was the FAA and the FBI's job to protect us domestically. We have 294 million people in America that on September 11th we didn't realize we were sitting ducks. Today we know we're sitting ducks, and nothing has been done that's a strategic plan that's in place. That is totally unacceptable. How do you have an administration whose primary focus in this campaign is the war on terrorism? We need boots on the ground in the United States of America. Our families are at risk today because they have failed to take a comprehensive, come to some kind of agreement as an administration on moving this bill forward. And I feel that from the time that the commission report was what's the word I'm looking? Released. From the time that I cannot understand why you would not embrace those recommendations and make them into legislation. We were naive to believe that our job was done once that report was released, and that our elected officials in the Congress, in the Senate, in the administration, in the Republican majorities in both houses would have embraced this report. Instead, we have been, I think, misled. We do not have legislation today. We are still vulnerable, and nothing has been done. And I feel that this is an example of another distraction here that is, splintering not only the administration, but the House and the Senate as well. And I think they have to take a clear and concise position as an administration, and it is their job as our elected officials to get this legislation in place.
Going back to Mr. Romer's comment about blame on election day, specifically, who do you think needs to be blamed, Congress or the administration directly, or who do you be voting against in response to
this is not our job. We have lost loved ones, and for 3 years now, we have been traveling to Washington back and forth, trying to get the legislation passed, begging to get an extension of time, begging to get extra funding, begging for people that should testify publicly to testify publicly, begging for, documents that are going to piece these failures together. And there's still documents. I mean, the CIA documents, the Commission still doesn't have those documents. You know, if we really want to understand how our government failed us and what has to be corrected, we need those answers. And now that we have that, I think it's appalling to me that we're not moving forward with some legislation that represents the core reforms that the 9/11 Commission has recommended.
In between when you met with the White House and you said they gave you a much later date, when they were looking at?
Next year. Their date was next year. At the meeting, it was
Judge Gonzalez.
Judge Gonzalez and three other, one of his staffers, member of Condoleezza Rice's staff. And to be exact, when we talked about implementing the legislation, the first date out of their mouth was next year.
Sometime next year.
Sometime next year. Okay.
Do you think that given the way the administration balked at this commission being formed to begin with, that this mixed signal is just sort of their way of trying to, are you concerned that it's their way of scuttling this bill entirely?
Well, I guess I'm becoming skeptical. I mean, as I said, why haven't they embraced this report? Why hasn't the president demanded to implement these reforms and have some legislation on his desk? He's the president of the United States. Why can't he control the Republican House, who would disallow a bipartisan bill to come to the floor of the House of Representatives? It didn't come to the floor because they realized it would pass and that this process would become too easy if they had identical bills.
Do you think, though, that maybe this push for immigration is like Senator Collins has called it a poison pill? Could that not have come from the White House? And I mean, are you skeptical that maybe something is going on that you're not being?
Well, I guess my concern with the immigration reforms, we felt that not only would they bog the bill down and because they were controversial, but that they required further debate. We heard from people in various committees that said, you know, this is a new thing to us. We, never talked about this. They haven't gone through the normal process of coming to some agreement. And yet it slid into this bill, just as in the Homeland Security bill. They had pharmaceutical lawsuits slid into a Homeland Security bill. What did that have to do? I mean, these are at least related, but they require further debate. And I think that, we have to move forward. We've waited over 3 years to have these answers of what the communication problems were, what they needed to do to work collaboratively, and how we can protect our country. If we don't have intelligence reforms implemented, if we don't have somebody that has budgetary authority, he's another figurehead. I mean, how can he do, his hands are tied if he can't identify, shift resources, prioritize what the threats are, and do it quickly, given the circumstances that it might be a shift that needs to be immediate. So I really feel that it's unacceptable that we don't have at least the Title I. I mean, my sense is they should come to some agreement on Title I, and there should be a bill on the desk of the president. And the debate that has happened since this legislation has come forward to conference, I think they wasted 4 days on legislation for immigration reform when they should have been focused on the real issues of having an intelligence director in place.
Do you guys have any sort of guarantee from, should Senator Kerry win the election, that he would sign this legislation at the beginning of the year?
We haven't talked to Senator Kerry or his campaign, but we have read in the press that, and we've seen on debates that he would sign it into legislation.
To answer Abraham Scott, to answer your question, you're making an assumption, and we're talking facts. If Senator Kerry wins, but we've got a man that's in the office right now that can make it happen, so we don't want to make an assumption. And also to answer this gentleman's question, and I'm going to repeat myself. In my opinion, Mr. Romer was stating that who will be held accountable if this bill is not passed, in my opinion, it's the House of Representatives, and foremost, that man that could make it happen, and that's Mr. Bush, the President.
Are you from California? Yeah. I know the cows. Go Bears. Go Bears. Hey. I was just here. Where do you live in City? No, we live in South.